California State Librarian, who I saw, there he is. Love him. And then, of course, Danielle Brazel, who's the Executive Director for the California Arts Council. So really looking forward to all three of you. And we'll just get started with you, Rick. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. First of all, my deep gratitude to the Honorable Senator Ben Allen and the Honorable Assembly Member Christopher Ward for convening us and hosting us today, and for their distinguished leadership in the cultural sector of California. My thanks to the members of the Joint Committee on the Arts and the Assembly Committee on Arts, Entertainment, Sports, and Tourism for listening to us today and for being supporters and leaders of California culture. So I am Rick Noguchi. I am the President and CEO of California Humanities. The humanities are the home for life's important questions, like why you exist and what is your purpose in life, what makes you human. The humanities explore and interpret the human condition, history, and expression, and it celebrates the human spirit. The humanities give context to the arts, and together they are the cultures that enliven and define us. But right now, those cultures and the culture of California are under attack. For 50 years, California Humanities has served as the designated state partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities, the NEH, bringing federal funds to California to connect Californians to ideas, to one another, and to understand our shared heritage and diverse cultures. Our vision at California Humanities is to ensure that Californians possess the knowledge, understanding, respect, and empathy to create a more thoughtful, open, and just state. We have advanced our democracy in California by lifting up untold stories and voices seldom heard with an approach that acknowledges diversity and embraces inclusion. And we believe that America's excellence and exceptionalism are a result of its embrace of all its peoples and what they contribute to our great state and our great nation. As a longtime steward of federal funds, California Humanities has been effective and efficient in using taxpayer monies to support humanities projects across the state and in every assembly district of California. Although we are an independent nonprofit, we are the designated federal state partner, similar to the California Arts Council, as well as the State Library. While not a state agency, 25% of our board are gubernatorially appointed. So we have a fixed connection to the state, yet we are currently do not receive any state funds to match our federal funds. Through grant-making programs like our California Documentary Project, which is the only documentary program dedicated to supporting and telling California stories, and our Humanities for All grants, which highlight local stories from El Cerrito to Bakersfield to Redding to San Diego. Our grantee partners highlight the stories that make California. Our funding has had considerable leverage for many years. Since 1975, we have granted over $44 million, supporting 2,175 nonprofit organizations, including libraries, museums, historical societies, cultural organizations, and education institutions. In small towns and big cities, on the coast, in the mountains, in the desert, and our valleys. Our funding makes a difference in helping all residents, new, young, and old, immigrants, and indigenous peoples better understand who California is and why we matter. On April 2nd, we received a letter from the acting chair of the NEH informing us, along with all 56 state and jurisdictional humanities councils, that our work, quote, no longer effectuates the needs and priorities of the agency, and that the NEH is repurposing its funding allocations in a new direction in furtherance of the president's agenda. After 50 years of serving California, our funding was cut immediately and without warning. Our annual budget of about $4.5 million, mostly from the NEH and approved by Congress, does not include from the state any funding. The impact of our terminated federal funds to California Humanities has a negative impact on our state, with 112 current nonprofit grantees directly affected, with $650,000 they were hoping to receive. I'd like to point out that California Humanities has awarded grants in each of your districts, and many of them have lost funding due to the cuts to California Humanities from the NEH. So for this year, in FY25, $970,000 in grants will not be awarded. So we were in the process of making several awards the day that we got the letter. For FY26, $2 million in grants is on the line. These are not huge amounts, but for the cultural sector, mostly with annual budgets under $1 million, the loss is devastating. Our already underfunded sector will be further hampered by the federal cuts. California culture is key not only to our success, but to the soul of our democracy. The misguided assault on cultural agencies and institutions will result in an erasure of the diversity that is our reality and our strength. So my question to you today is, what is California willing to do now to protect, preserve, and advance California culture as a beacon of the culture of our nation? Is the Joint Committee willing to commit investments to safeguard who we are as Californians? And by the way, I am deliberately saying culture because the issue is more than the arts. The humanities, our museums, our libraries, along with the arts, not only have considerable economic impact from each of our respective areas, but together we help define the collective culture of California. So is it possible to have the Joint Committee make investments to keep us intact for now and to explore dedicated funding through a ballot measure or other mechanism that would sustain our culture on an ongoing basis? I look forward to your questions and just want to thank the committee again for your dedication and leadership in the arts and to the culture.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing your very important story forward for all these members to hear, and a lot of follow-up to do on that. So let's go next to our state librarian.
Greg Lucas, California State Library. Thank you for including the State Library and California Libraries, which play a significant role in California's arts and culture community. As partners, as facilitators, as platforms, on any given day, I'm telling you what you know already, but on any given day, there's 100,000 different programs.
This is why we want to have this hearing, because the level of challenge that we face right now as a result of all this is enormous, and we really do have to figure out another path. And just for those of you who just got here, we started this panel with our great friend from the head of the California Humanities, which is a standalone organization that's been around for a long time, helping to fund stories about California from all different types. I mean, they've had extraordinary number of documentaries and programs all over the state, and they're literally, they've been very reliant on federal funds, and they're now being told that they're getting zeroed out. So, I guess since this is an arts group here, I guess I could quote Hamilton and just say, "Stay alive, stay alive." I mean, we've got to keep you alive, right? I mean, to last through the situation. So whether that's some state funding, I want to make sure my colleagues understand the threat that exists to this particular statewide organization that has been, reasonably relying on federal funding for years and years through Republican and Democratic administrations, and is now being threatened to zero out. So can you just give us the latest? We met a couple weeks ago to talk about your situation. I certainly want to do everything we can to help, but can you tell us the latest about the federal conversation with regards to any news from the congressional conversation as it goes to NEH and state programs, and any progress on that front, and how your federal strategy is evolving?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to address that, and thank you for the question, and thank you for the support.
And the song too, hopefully the song. Yeah.
I was trying to think of a Hamilton song, but it's not going to.
No song. No.
One more time, I think.
Okay, all right.
One last time.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, our funding from the NEH has been cut. We do have a reserve that we are currently operating on. At the federal level, our Federation of State Humanities is currently exploring the option of taking legal action. So because we're a little different, we're not state agencies. We're kind of quasi-state agency. We're independent nonprofits. We did explore the possibility of having a multi-state litigation, against the NEH and their decision to terminate our funding. And we were hoping that the attorneys general would take it on. Unfortunately, because we're not a state agency, they're not able to take it on.
They're not able to?
They're not able to. We're not a state agency. So they're willing to help us in our pursuit. We are exploring that option of having pro bono or to hire an attorney to take on the case. So
now, what about so that's great. I mean, I think as we've been discussing all morning, there's a litigation strategy. There's got to be an advocacy strategy. So given the fact that you and your counterparts represent all sorts of communities all over the country, red and blue states, how are you? Is there what's the status of an advocacy campaign to members of Congress and others to push back?
Yeah, so we're continuing to advocate for funding for FY26. And ironically, we are eligible for funding for FY26, and I did submit an application for that funding. Remember that we were our funding was terminated for FY25 because we didn't align with the president's priorities. So going into FY26, in the application, we really have to use language that aligned with the president's priorities. Of course, that's not really well defined. I mean, we have some executive orders, but the language of being patriotic, looking at American excellence, we've been doing that. We've been doing that work, and I'll point out one of the reasons why we are set up as independent nonprofits versus being a state agency was because they wanted to keep the humanities more neutral so that there wasn't going to be a political agenda by the state governors. And so we were really intended to be more neutral in that by having a nonprofit do the work. But we're continuing to do advocacy and try to get funding for FY26. Unlike past years, it's not guaranteed. We're not sure how they're going to make decisions on our FY26 funding, but I would like us to be around for that time before we can be here to accept those funds if we're awarded a FY26 grant.
And just for the edification of the committee, some of whom may be more or less familiar with the work, can you give us some examples of the kind of stuff that you've been funding of late, including great stories of California excellence, American excellence?
Yeah, I mean, and you'll be hearing, from a few grantees or potential grantees that are here to provide public testimony later today. But, we have been one of the primary funders of documentaries in California. And we created that program as a counterbalance to the East Coast. And so when the NEH, started funding documentaries through, PBS, a lot of it was very East Coast centered.
Yeah.
And so California Humanities created the California Documentary Project so that we could counterbalance that and really have, our story told. And you'll find, historically in the past, few decades, that many documentaries that have got airplay on PBS started with California Humanities funding. So, there's one that's out there right now called New Wave that explores the Vietnamese involvement with New Wave music in the 1980s. And it's really becomes a very personal story to the filmmaker, because in the process of making that film, she learns about the intergenerational trauma that she had been suffering. And she initially set out to create a documentary about music, but she realized that her relationship with her mother was because of this intergenerational trauma. That's a very California story. And so we were happy to be able to support something like that.
And there's so many of those. I mean, you did one on Pat Brown. There's one on Ed Edelman from the LA County Supervisor. There was a Republican Assembly member, I think, from Riverside County that had a great documentary. There's stuff on Native Californians, Chinese American community, Jewish community. I mean, so many of these wonderful stories that I just commend to everyone. These are the documentaries that end up in classrooms, in our schools, as kids are learning about California history. As you say, American history is the textbooks are so dominated by East Coast stories, which are really important stories, very foundational for our country. And there's so many interesting stories here. And the California Humanities has been really at the heart of the effort to tell those stories in an accessible way, of stories of all different types. And they're literally getting zeroed out. So we've got to figure out a way to help them stay alive. So let's open up for any questions, thoughts, things that folks want to raise, or something reward.
Thank you. Thank you for your candid and direct, contributions this morning.